All right, let's get into it. Today, we're not just going to memorize facts about electricity. No, we're going to build a toolkit, a mental toolkit that's going to help you really understand and, master this whole topic. So let's get started.
I mean, really think about it for a sec. You flip a switch and bam, light. But what is actually going on inside that wire? What's this invisible magic happening all around us all the time? Well, we're about to pull back the curtain.
Okay, so every toolkit needs the basics, right? The hammer, the screwdriver. For us, that starts with the absolute fundamentals, the tiny little particles that are the spark of it all, and what happens when they get moving. So it all, and I mean all of it, starts with charge. It's a basic property of stuff, just like mass. Deep inside atoms, you've got these positive protons and negative electrons. That's charge. And that's the little seed that all of electricity grows from. We measure it in something called coulombs.
So what happens when you get a bunch of these charges to start moving, to flow? Well, that's what we call electric current. The best way to think about it is like a river. It's not just that there's water, it's about how much water is flowing past you every single second. That rate of flow is the current, and we measure it in amps, or you've probably heard amps.
And that brings us to our very first tool, our first key formula. It's super simple. Current, which we call I, is just the amount of charge, Q, divided by the time it took to flow, T. So charge per second. It's a really powerful little equation that connects how much stuff is flowing to how fast it's flowing. Make sure you get this one into your toolkit. It's a big one.
You know, in every story, you've got these two opposing forces, right? A hero and a villain. In electricity, it's kind of the same. There's a force that's pushing the current and another force that's trying to stop it. It's this constant tug of war.
So first up, we've got the push. We call it potential difference, but you probably know it as voltage. Think of it like water pressure in a pipe. If there's no pressure, the water just sits there, right? Voltage is that electrical pressure that gets the charges moving. Plain and simple, no push, no flow. And fighting against that push is our obstacle, which is called resistance. And yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a property of any material that resists or gets in the way of that current. It's basically electrical friction. It's the rukavat, the hindrance, trying to slow everything down.
So, what makes something have more or less resistance? Let's go back to our analogy. Think of a highway, a really, really long highway. Well, that's a longer journey, more of a hassle, so more resistance. But what if the highway is super wide with lots of lanes? Well, now traffic can flow easily, right? So that's less resistance. And of course, the material the road is made of matters a lot too.
Okay, we've got the push, voltage. We've got the flow, current. And we've got the obstacle, resistance. Now it's time for the master blueprint, the golden rule that connects them all together. Now, I know the official definition sounds a little dense, but the idea behind it is incredibly simple. All it's saying is that the bigger the push, the voltage, the bigger the flow, or the current. It's a direct relationship. You double the push, you double the flow, as long as that obstacle, the resistance, doesn't change. And it all comes down to this one beautiful, simple equation, V equals I times R. And here's a little trick to remember it for your exams. Just think of the word viral. V, I, R. V equals IR. Seriously, this equation is the absolute heart of your electricity toolkit. Okay, so we've got our tools, we've got our golden rule. Now let's see what happens when we start actually building things, connecting components together. This is where it gets really practical. So there are two main ways to connect things, series and parallel. In a series circuit, think of a single-lane country road. The amount of traffic, the current, has to be the same everywhere on that road. But the voltage, or the energy, gets spent a little bit at each component along the way. Now, a parallel circuit is more like a big highway, where the road splits into many different lanes. The current splits up to go down each path, but the voltage, that initial push, is the same for every single lane. And here you can see it perfectly. On the left is that single road series circuit. On the right, the multiple highway parallel circuit. Now here's the critical difference. In series, if one part breaks, it's like a car crash blocking the entire road. Everything stops. But in parallel, if one lane is blocked, who cares? The current just takes the other open roads.
All right, let's bring this all home. Why does any of this matter? Because this toolkit explains stuff you see every single day, from how your toaster gets hot to how that electricity bill you get in the mail is actually calculated.
So, one of the most obvious effects of current is heat. Remember that resistance we talked about, the electrical friction? Well, when current has to fight its way through that resistance, some energy gets converted into heat. We call this Joule's law of heating. And that's literally how your toaster works, how an electric heater works, and even how an old-school light bulb glows. Now, when the power company wants to bill you, they can't count every single little joule of energy. The numbers would be insane. So instead, they use a bigger, more practical unit called the kilowatt hour. That's the amount of energy a 1,000-watt appliance would use if you left it on for a whole hour. This is what you actually pay for. And get this, here's the conversion. Just one of those kilowatt hours is equal to 3.6 million joules. It's kind of crazy when you realize just how much energy we're using without even thinking about it, huh? So let's wrap this up by putting your new toolkit to a quick test. Just think about the lights in your house. If one light bulb burns out, do all the other lights in the house go off too? Based on what we just learned about series and parallel circuits, what does that tell you? How is your home wired? Something to think about.